Hello everyone, this is Jotto, and welcome to the it was supposed to be 9.8, but it's actually 9.9 patch review. So, this was the major rebalancing of Spellweaver that came out on, what was it, Wednesday? Yeah, and then they hotfixed it yesterday, because there was some broken stuff with it, basically. But, anyway, I haven't been streaming that much recently, at all, in fact, and as usual with these things, it's not by choice. My internet on the university campus has been completely broken to the point when even uploading videos has been difficult. It takes a very, very long time to upload a video at this point, and I can't stream at all. I have asked for it to be fixed, but it's the weekend, so I'm not expecting it to be fixed until Monday or Tuesday. And it's a long process to try and get something fixed when you don't have direct control over it. That's basically what I'm trying to get at here. So my stream is on hiatus until further notice. I do want to stream every day, I just don't have the ability to, and it's very irritating, but there's honestly nothing I can do. So I'll try and get it fixed as fast as possible, and then I'll make a video when I can stream again. But at the moment, you'll just have to watch the Fuzz or anyone else who happens to be streaming, and if I'm around when Fuzz is, then you may come across me on Skype with him. Because Skype still works, but I can't do anything demanding with the internet as far as upload goes. So anyway, this patch has been an interesting one because they made quite a few changes to cards, mostly underused cards, although the 20 life change, they changed it back to 20 life. And in the process they had to nerf red, because red would be close to broken at 20 life. In fact, it used to be, and it was overshadowed by Wisdom, Dominion, and Angels, which were just two more overpowered decks. However, they did nerf red, but there's been a couple hiccups with this one because a lot of the cards that they changed have complicated mechanics. Which means that, well, the phrase goes beta is beta, but let's just say that when you change cards' mechanics that are complicated, you get some bugs and some unforeseen consequences. So they had to hotfix it on Saturday as well, and there's another game-breaking bug in the game right now, which I'm expecting them to hotfix in a few days. It is kind of amusing, although, to be fair, it is expected, because, as I said, when you make changes to complicated cards, and you make a lot of changes at once, it's very easy for small things to slip through the cracks. So anyway, we're going to go over the changes as they are now, so post-hotfix. We're going to go over the heroes first, and then we're going to go over the cards they changed. And there is a lot of them. There is a ton of them. We haven't seen this many changes since, probably the Wisdom Dominion, since the 25 life patch, actually. So that's kind of amusing. So, first things first. Alright, this is going to be a long patch notes video, so I will get started. Starting life changed to 20 with 40 for life gain win. That's the same as it used to be. So yeah, keeping that in mind, let's go into the heroes. Now, some of you remember my suggested changes to underused cards video that I made about a week ago. And I'm very proud to announce that one of them made it into the game. Well, 1.5. But this one made it into the game exactly as a suggestion, which was Soul Ravens from Coronis and our 1/1s. I have played against Coronis, and honestly, the hero power is actually useful now. It basically makes 2-mana 2/2s with flying and lifebound if you can attack, which is really, really good, and it makes 1/1s that can give you a life back when they're blocking, which is also really nice, because it means you only really lose 1 life for jump blocking, not 2, which I think is cool. Does it mean he's playable? I do not know the answer to that question. Implants got worse because of Gross Experiment change, but then they also got better because of Coronis change. And maybe there's a Dominion aggro deck out there. It's possible. They have the hero for it now. Coronis is the hero they needed for that kind of archetype. So we will see. But the hero is now playable. It's definitely very good in Trials now. I really like the idea of playing Coronis in Trials. It gives you free guys whenever you don't have anything to do with your mana, which in Trials can be a lot of the time. On to Enoch. Another hero that got buffed. The buff is now +1/+1 instead of +1/0 until end of turn, and then they don't die end of turn. Now, I'm not sure how I feel about this. It does let you trade. It also means that they can't like block your guys to jump block them and things like that. So that's a plus. Although on the other side of things, the problems with Enoch remain, which is that there's no positive permanent benefit besides life, and that's slightly better given the life totals are lower now, but it's just not enough. And you can theoretically do trading, but because you're not playing basic Nepharos, you can't trade with anything like you can with basic Nepharos. So in reality, it just is a bit of a dead zone. Although it does mean that you can get Insatiable Ghoul to kill Karthus, which is fairly funny. But in reality, like, there's magical Christmas Land scenarios, and then there's reality, and I don't think Enoch will see any play. I think he needed a different buff. I like the idea of buffing underused heroes, but I think he needed a different buff. Like, Coronis got a buff to him when he is at his worst, and also when he's just functioning normally. Whereas Enoch got a buff to when he works, as opposed to when he doesn't work, which means that he just won't see any play. On to the two completely overpowered heroes that got nerfed. Well, one of them got tweaked, the other one got just straight nerfed. So, Advanced Zash. Now, Advanced Zash, hilariously enough, is now the simplest advanced hero in the entire game. If we go on to, back to cards, and we look at all the advanced heroes, you got lines of text, 2 lines, like 4 lines, things like that, and then you've got Zash, who has less text than the basic version. But that's just a funny tidbit, but I like the change. Basically, he only deals damage to creatures now. I like this change for a couple of reasons. First things first, with 20 life, it means that you can't abuse his hero power as an aggressive hero power. Now you have to use things like probably Burke or Basic Zash for mono-red aggro, simply because Advanced Zash will hurt you more than it helps you, because it can't deal any damage to them while clearing their board. So, Zash now changes roles to a more controlling focused guy, because control decks will use his hero power 3, maybe 4 times in a game, and now that doesn't deal 12 damage to you. So that's actually a big help, and is why I've been trying to do some tinkering with some rage control mid-rangey decks that rely on going to the long game a little bit more. So I do like this change. I think that it's very, very good for the game, because Zash's hero power is still very strong and was always very strong, but now it has a defined role as opposed to being able to do everything. Like, it was useful in control, mid-range, aggro. It was just useful everywhere and was universally the best hero power you could have in red, and it was arguably the best hero power in the game, along with Neva. Now, ironically, this also buffs it against Neva because it means you don't kill yourself, but Neva got nerfed, so yeah, we'll go over that now. Neva's change, now it just got reverted back to the old one, 2 mana. The funny thing about this is a lot of people say, oh, they just killed it. But in reality, I don't even know if that's true, and I'm aware I've got a message, I'll check that later. I'm not really sure if it technically nerfs it to its old version, because we've done so much deck tweaking with it now that we know versions that work and know that Neva can be used potentially in some environments. So yeah, we'll have to see how this goes, but I don't know. I think that Neva will see play in a slower environment. I think the metagame is a little too quick right now, but when there's a control metagame, Neva will be there. Like, we know how to build these decks now. We know how to build decks that generate large amounts of mana and are very, very creature efficient. So, yeah, I think Neva will see a little bit more play in the future. But for now, I'm saying that she's not going to see that much play because Soldiers got better, and with Soldiers getting better, Neva gets worse. Soldiers has always been a counter to that deck. So, that's the heroes out of the way. Now, we'll do these in color order, I guess, since that's the way that they're organized, and sorry, Lumry, I will check your message later. But anyway, so first things first, Angelica, back to 5 mana. I always found it hilarious that Angelica has a cooldown, by the way, since you can only activate when you win. But that's not the point. So Angelica's nerf kind of made it impossible to win that way with Angels, and the fact that life total's been decreased means that it's even harder, so I think at 6 mana I would just never see any play, even in Angels. So yeah, Angelica is the control killer for Angels. You basically just go Path, and then just put a bunch of Angels under it and Angelica and win. But the metagame's a bit too quick, and on top of that, it was 6 mana, and it just was impossible. So I'm glad they've reverted this. I think it was a bit of an overnerf in Angels. Angels is not the most fun deck to play against in the world, but I mean, Guardian already got nerfed, Protector got nerfed, so I think Try Angelica getting nerfed was just overkill. Militia's text got changed completely, which ironically makes the Militia better, but means that the card will never see play. Let me explain. So, Militia got changed from having its old cost, where it got zero mana cost if you had another Militia on the board, to what it is now, which is as long as its attack is greater than 1, it has +1 speed. So if you play a buff, it becomes a 2 speed. Or if you Cavalry Field Captain, it becomes a 3 speed 2/2, which is very relevant. Now, the funny thing about this is that this is a massive buff to basic Alexa, pretty much. Like, yes, you can't do basic Alexa with multiple Militia on turn 1, but that was never really that strong of an opening. It was okay, but it was really weak to things like Fire Blast. Whereas now you're not as overcommitted to it, so your Fire Blast does less damage. So the Militia that you get from Alexa's Hero Power are stronger, but now there's basically no reason to play Militia normally, because if you're playing that kind of deck, you're playing basic Alexa. So it's both, it's a buff to Militia, but a nerf to the actual card. It's basically just a token at this point. And I would not be surprised if in future, maybe there was a redesign where Militia was just made into a token and Order got a different card. Because that's just a bit of a weird interaction. I appreciate the buffs to soldiers, but it's just a bit random how the interaction works. But it's not too irritating. It's just a bit. It's not very elegant it's an elegant change, but it's not very elegant in the way it affects the aspect. So I would not put it past them to replace Militia as a card and just make it into a token, like a unique token, kind of like Soul Ravens are, where Soul Ravens are complicated tokens. Militia could just be a complicated token at this point, so yeah, I do like the change, but as I said, it just has this weird like caveat to it. On to the only change to Wisdom, Silencer. Now this was hotfixed from 4 energy to 3, but I'll just explain what it actually does now. So the cost is identical. It can't gain energy, it's still legendary. However, what it does now is that it starts at 3 energy, and non-shrine cards, I'm just going to read it. Non-shrine cards, the enemy hero plays cost 1 more mana for each energy Silencer has, and whenever they play a non-shrine, it loses 1 energy, and if it has no energy, you sack it and draw. So basically, they're trying to change Silencer from a lockout card to a tempo card. The reason it was hotfixed from 4 to 3 was because at 4 energy, what you could do was with basic Despina, 3 color, you could just rampant Silencer and go Dragon Refresh Silencer, and there was nothing they could do. They could not play anything because everything in their hand would cost like 8 mana. So they changed it to 3 energy, which made a lot of sense. Is it still going to see play? Yes, because it cantrips, and if they don't have artifact removal, it's really brutal, and if they do, you have lamps. So I think Silencer will still see play. Where it will see play, I don't know. But the point is it will still see play somewhere. You're still trading 4 mana for 6, and you're not losing card advantage. That makes sense. 6 being 3 energy plus 2 plus 1. Whereas with the old version, with the 4 energy, it was 10. That's why it was too powerful. So, yeah, I actually like this change to Silencer. I didn't really like the whole lockout thing, and it ensures that a control deck can become powerful using Silencer, but the idea is that it doesn't give you that feeling of hopelessness, since that's what they're trying to avoid. And there's another change to Chalice of Life, I think is what it's called. Anyway, just Chalice, that we'll see later on in the patch does something similar, which is avoiding the unfun like aspect of playing against control in general. Because there's nothing wrong with control decks, but they're trying to promote control decks interacting with their opponent as opposed to what Silencer basically was, which was just a preemptive counterspell that you could layer multiple times and you just couldn't play anything through it sometimes. On to Brother-in-Arms. Yes, this got a buff. Now, this is a minor buff, however, it is notable because what happened is that when he summons the other one from your deck, it counts as you playing it for basic Neva. Now, this does not count for advanced Neva, it's only for basic Neva. So basically, basic Neva. Anyway, So what happens here is that when you play it with basic Neva, you for 3 mana and 2 levels, you can go 4/4 haste attack. That's basically what you can do. Now that sounds like Jungle Death Trap as well. However, it means that now Jungle Death Trap has the advantage of only being 1 level, and preemptively stopping them from playing things. Brother in Arms has the advantage of being able to now be a hasted removal option in green. This is important. This is really important, being a hasted removal option in green. Because with basic Neva, what you can do is make 2 2/2s and attack 2 different things and get a 2-for-1 straight up for 3 mana and 2 levels. It's basically a green Fire Blast in basic Neva decks, and that's really cool. I think that's really strong. Something weird about this patch was they nerfed Advanced Neva and they nerfed Fav Charm, which we'll get to. However, they buffed 2 green cards that I think would make a Elf Rush deck viable, along with the life gain chain, along with the life change. So yeah, the other card that got changed drastically was Primordial Triet. Now, funny story with this one. Primordial Triet got Primordial Triet got nerfed from its original change. And the reason for this, if I can just pull this up here, I probably should have done this ahead of time, but there was a reason that it got changed, because its original change was that it was still 3 mana, but what happened was that at any time you could put a creature under it, an elf. So the problem with this, for 0 cost, the problem with this was that with Advanced Neva, this is why this was hotfixed, you could do stuff like this. If I just bring this up here. So this was me playing against the Fuzz, briefly, trying to show off the brokenness of the Triet before it got fixed. So what you're looking at here is a Dominion Neva deck, which is focusing around comboing. And the reason I got so many guys here, and I want to point out that if we just move this up a bit, this is turn 8. So what you could do was play a tree, you could just go through your entire deck with Overwhelming Forces, play a tree, put 4 elves under it, bounce it back to your hand. You could make 4 mana, put it under the tree, bounce it back to your hand, make 4 more mana, use 2 Summoner Druids to make it cost 0, play it again, Overwhelming Forces, get your entire deck onto the field, and then next turn, attack with everything, tie up every single blocker. And I had 3 trees in this. I had 4 trees. He Tornado Outbreaked 1. I had all 4 trees. I attacked with all 4 plus every elf, basically, that I could. I mean, I could have killed him here anyway. But the point was that no matter how many blockers he had, he was going to die. Because what happens after this is that you tie up every single blocker, and then this happens. You put all of the elves under the tree and hit him for 60. This is why this was hotfixed. It was very broken, and we only got to play with this for a day. This is what I meant when I said that when you change a complicated card, it sometimes breaks the game. But they did note it, they caught it, and changed it. Which was very good, because this could, I mean, if this was Hearthstone, this would have stayed in the game for months. But that was, I had a lot of fun doing this, but I would not want it to be in the game long term, so I'm very glad they changed it to what it is now, which is, getting back to the actual patch notes, Primordial Triet is now much better than it used to be. It costs 1 mana less, but has the same stats, and instead of being an end of turn, you can pay 1 mana to put an elf under the Primordial Triet at any point for 1 Might Emblem, so you can't fireball people with it. Now, the reason I like this is because of a few things. First of all, the Triet is now a turn 3, 3/3 in green. This is important. It's a 3/3 in green, which is very difficult to interact with. On turn 3, as we've seen before, or even turn 2, you can go Triet. The other reason I like this is because for 1 mana, you already have 1 mana tricks open. In green a lot. Your curve actually has 1 mana open for Ambush Strike, for instance. So your opponent now has to worry about 2 different things. You have a Triet on board. Is he just bluffing? Like, if I attack something, is he just going to put it under the tree? Or is he going to Ambush Strike it and, like, block? Is he going to Ambush Strike and then just eat my guy? The other reason this is irritating is Fireball got nerfed recently, but you can actually just protect your stuff. You can just play Treant, and you can put your Elf Scouts under the Treant when attacking. Like, you can tie up a guy and just you can make the Elf Scout unblockable. Now, I mentioned Brother-in-Arms earlier. If you have enough mana, like, you need 5 mana for this to work, but what you can actually do is, or even 4 mana, what you can do for 4 mana is play Brother-in-Arms, attack 2 creatures. One of them you're going to lose the trade, it's just to stop it from blocking. The other one's a trade. Attack with the Treant, attack him in the face, and then just pay 1 mana, put the Brother-in-Arms that would die and not get a trade under the tree, making it a 4/4 attacking, that's unblockable, and then your other Brother-in-Arms trades, but then when the Treant dies, the Brother-in-Arms comes back, because it wasn't on the board when his brother died, so he didn't die. So you can do some interesting tricks with this. And it's not as broken as it was in the image I just showed, but the point is that you can actually do interesting things with it now, which you just couldn't before. Now, I don't know if this is bugged with Helm. It used to be really buggy with Helm of Dominion, where what would happen is if you stole it, you just couldn't target the Helm or the tree. It was just completely bugged. I don't know if it's still like that. I hope not, but I do know this is interesting. Will it see constructed play? Possibly. I think there is some sort of Elf aggro deck, and if there is an Elf aggro deck, then this is a good addition to that deck. It is a 3/3 on turn 3, which Elves didn't have. They had kind of a Sharpshooter at turn 3, but they didn't have anything in its control decks. So you've got this 3/3 on turn 3 into Elf Commander into Haldiri now, whereas before you didn't. You kind of had like Sharpshooter, which wasn't really that good on 3 sometimes. It also means you have an extra 3-drop now, which is really nice. Fav Charm. As I said, this is going to be a long patch review. Fav Charm got a lot of changes. Only, like, okay, so Fav Charm, first of all, had its mana increase. Now, a lot of people thought this was designed to nerf Neva. However, in reality, they just wanted to see, they didn't nerf Neva until the hotfix on Saturday, and the reason for it was because they wanted to see how Neva would interact with the field at 20 life, since it's naturally weaker when it's when the game promotes more rush decks. It turned out that it was just too powerful to leave in the game, so they did nerf it. However, Fav Charm was nerfed for a couple of reasons. First of all, well, not really even a couple, like 3 or 4. First of all, it was completely overpowered in Trials and just wrecked that format whenever there was a Fav Charm involved. Second of all, Instill Life plus Call of Yalaya meant that there was a Hermeleon deck that could just abuse Fav Charm. The deck itself, I mentioned Hermeleon Green in my meta report, was a tier 2 deck. However, the deck itself was not overpowered, but it was mechanically broken. The reason I say this is because you would have games where if they got the right draw, they could just go Fae, Fae, Call of Yalaya, Fae, Fae, and if they die, instill, attack, steal your guys, refresh with hero power, attack, steal 2 other guys, and just kill you immediately. So the deck itself wasn't overpowered, but I think part of the reason for that was that the other 2 decks at the time that were dominating were Advanced Neva and Advanced Zash, which both had very good matchups against Hermeleon Green if built correctly. Now, some red decks did have some issues, but Advanced Neva in general was very good against Hermeleon Green, and it kind of suppressed the deck. Whereas now, I don't think there's anything to stop it, and I think it would actually break the game. So that's why Fae got changed in that regard. The other thing was it did slightly nerf Advanced Neva, but they had another nerf plan for Advanced Neva anyway. On to Red. Red got quite a few changes because of the fact that the life totals got decreased, so they needed a couple damage nerfs. First things first, Lizard Barbarian. Now, Lizard Barbarian currently... Again, it was hotfixed. So Lizard Barbarian was first changed to be a 1/2 unless it was attacking, then it's a 2/2, and it just couldn't block, I think. It could attack, but it couldn't block. Yeah. I can't remember. But anyway, it was only around for a day. The point was that they discovered it was kind of broken in the Rage Mirror matches because whoever played a Lizard Barbarian first just won. However, they then changed it to what it is currently, which is can't block, and it only gains a +1 attack when it's attacking the enemy hero directly. Now, this did cause a bug to arise, which is that it's gaining +1 attack for each attacking creature, but the balance, but as I said, beta is beta. This is the game-breaking bug that came across, and I'm expecting it to hotfix it in a few days. Kind of like they did with Triumph, they didn't foresee that. So, yeah. The card itself, though, when it's working, like when it works correctly, I think this is a good nerf because it means that you can actually attack a Lizard Barbarian and you can also block a Lizard Barbarian efficiently. Whereas before it would trade with your Elf Warrior, now it doesn't. It doesn't trade with your Sunblessed Priest either, so you gain 2 life. It doesn't trade with it because you can block it and then it's not attacking the hero anymore. Kind of like Spirit's Walker. And Spirit's Walker is way worse because it's a 2-drop. However, Lizard Barbarian is still playable, but I think it's definitely worse than it used to be, or at least it should be. In its current version, like its bugged version, it's just ridiculous. But in its actual version, the way it's supposed to be, I think that it's worse than the Goblin, unless against soldiers, then you can kill the Militia. But it's worse than Goblin in a lot of situations, but it is an extra set of 2 attack 1-drops that you may need in aggro decks. So I do like this change. Fireball got nerfed to 3. Now, 3-mana Fireball is an interesting change that I don't think a lot of people were expecting. I do like it, though, because Fireball was just so much better than Assassinate was, and it was so much better than things like Consume Spirit, where Consume Spirit and Assassinate were situational, and Fireball was the opposite, where it could even go to the face and could kill more stuff. So I'm glad it costs 3 mana now. It's still instant, which is a big deal. And I think that it's not good enough to run 4 in a lot of decks now. I think it's only a 3 of, maybe a 2 of. But the point was that red had too much good removal, so I'm happy that Fireball got nerfed. It can still be sent to the face if necessary, but I don't think it's a 4 of anymore. We shall see. Gath. Now, Gath got a mana increase by 1, so now takes 5 mana to attack for 5. I think the reason this happened instead of Dragonfire nerf was that the difference between Gath and Dragonfire is, while you can block Gath, if you don't have a blocker, and to be honest, a lot of decks don't have an instant method of dealing with Gath, he attacked for 5, but then you had to spend a removal spell on him as well. So he's basically a Dragonfire that made you discard a card and still take 5. But then if you couldn't deal with him at all, he then dealt 7 and then 9, and then you're just dead. So Gath was a 3-turn clock on his own. That's why he got nerfed, and he was too efficient, as we saw in Burning Rage, where in Burning Rage, along with Vampirisms, you had Ramgaths and Phoenixes basically taking the game down on their own. Like, you only need a couple Ramgath attacks and you win the game. He was that good. So I'm glad they nerfed this. He was also a little insane with things like, as I said, Vampirism and Massive Assault. Massive Attack, I think? Yeah. Always get those two confused. But Massive Attack, he was just ridiculous. Like, he attacked for 7, and then he attacked for 12 with Massive Attack, so I'm glad this nerf happened. I think it was deserved. I'm also happy they didn't nerf Phoenix, because I think that Phoenix serves a slightly different role now, that the game is now focused more on mid-rangey red and rush red, meaning that Phoenix is less of a bridge than it used to be. And to be honest, I think Phoenix was not as powerful as a lot of people were letting on to, because it was very obviously countered by some cards. Helm, Pacify, Fav Charm, Ancient Triet, Primordial Triet now. Primordial, not Primordial. Primordial Triet counters it now because you can make Primordial into a 4/4, and you can just put whatever elf is being attacked or is attacking and got blocked by the Phoenix under the tree. So I think that green has an answer to it, so does Dominion, Order, Wisdom has Sleep if necessary. Rage is a bit kind of finicky against Phoenix, but the point is that Rage actually does have their own, so that kind of counters it. The only aspect that really does have some serious issues against Phoenix is Corruption. But Corruption is generally a 2-color thing anyway, so I don't think Phoenix warranted a nerf, and I'm glad they didn't. Gross Experiment, so on to Dominion. Now, Gross Experiment got redesigned. It's now a support creature, so defaults to support, same stats and cost. Whenever an implant is attached to Gross Experiment, move it to frontline, draw a card. The reason this is important is it means you can put it on the back row, and then you can play an Overcharger, draw a card, and attack. That's ridiculous. That's such a good mechanic there. And it's on curve as well. You can actually go Spoil the Aristocrat, Gross Experiment, and then Overcharger on the Experiment attack and get in 9 damage, or 6 or 9 damage with the Aristocrat. So that's really cool to me. It's a nerf for pure implant decks, But I think that this is a good design, and I prefer this for like starter decks, and I prefer this in general. It also gives you a bit of draw in a mono Dominion aggro deck, which I do like. On top of that, you can use Gnome Surgeon with it to promote multiple gross experiments in one turn and just do these big attacks out of nowhere, which gives you two things. First of all, it gives you support line manipulation, which we need more of in this game, and two, it gives you a board comeback just through tricks, which we also need more in this game. So I'm very happy that Gross Experiment will change like this. If you have a Gnome Surgeon and a Gross Experiment, you could fetch a Grapple Claw, put on the Gross Experiment, goes to the front, pull his guy towards you and attack him. You can actually manipulate both support lines just through this combo now, and I really, really like that idea, and I think it's really cool. Is it good enough to see constructive play? I honestly don't know the answer to that, because the old Gross Experiment sold very small amounts anyway. But I like the design, and I think that the direction they're taking this in is very good. We'll have to see what kind of impact it makes, but I think, considering it was in a starter deck, I think that this is a very, very good teaching tool, because it teaches you a lot about the support row and how to manipulate it, and it also is less random, and that's the other thing we don't really want to have related to starter decks, is randomness. On to, oh yeah, Chalice of Yunks, not Chalice of Life. Chalice of Yunks got changed from what it was to 1 mana. It gains 1 energy whenever a creature you control dies, and for 2 mana you can empty the Chalice and gain that much life. I am so happy they changed this. Oh my god, I think everyone was. In fact, their description of why they changed this was that the old Chalice was so unfun that they were thinking of changing it last month because of just how atrocious it was to play against, even though it wasn't very good. But they just didn't have time. That is literally, this nerf has been in the works for about a month, because it's so miserable. Chalice is one of those cards that was just so miserable to play against that, like, it could actually make you, like, rage quit Spellweaver for a day if you played against a Chalice of Yunks player a couple times in a row. So I'm very happy they changed this. Now, will this see any play? It's actually a reasonable question. I think that if you need a life gain option in a Wisdom Dominion deck, for instance, you could play Chalice as an incremental life gain option. To be honest, it's not the worst idea in the world, because the old one required you to sacrifice stuff to it, whereas this one just gains bonuses from your creatures, which can give you a little bit of a life boost, which I do like. And it costs less, which means you can combine it with things like Atomic Reflector. Not Atomic Reflector, Atomic Laboratory, and just make a little bit of extra life from that, and maybe that'll help you life gain win or something like that. We'll have to see. But I do like this change because it makes the card a lot less irritating. Cataclysm got not reverted, but it got changed to 5 mana from 6. Now, the reason for this is not that Cataclysm was too weak, but that with 20 life, they felt as if 5 mana Cataclysm is more necessary, because a 6 mana Cataclysm would come too late to actually do anything. Like, a 6 mana Cataclysm when you have 20 life would probably come down when you're dead. Whereas the current Cataclysm with 5 mana is just in time to save you, but will not win you the game against really fast openings. You still need defensive openings. You can't just rely on Cataclysm like you used to be able to with the 4 mana version. So I do like this version of Cataclysm. This was the balanced change to the original Cataclysm, was 5 mana. However, with the life gain total increase, I think that 6 was correct at the time. So I think that I'm behind this one. Cataclysm in general is not the most fun card to play against. It's a little bit annoying. I did play a lot of 4 mana Cataclysm. I played Wisdom Dominion in that season, some of you may remember, but I think 5 is the correct total for this particular card. Random other comment, by the way, Cataclysm has one of the single best pieces of art of any card in the game. Haunted Cemetery. The only change to this is that its requirements went from double corruption to corruption generic. This was something that the Fuzz suggested in my thread with balance changes, and I'm very happy about it, because the old Haunted Cemetery was absurd. Why did you need to pay double corruption for that hero power? It just was not necessary. Now I think that it will see a decent amount of play in corruption decks. The question is, will corruption be a playable color? I'm veering on no, but the point is that Haunted Cemetery is now playable in Corruption Splash. In a Corruption control deck, you can now play Haunted Cemetery more easily if you want to. Or you can play just, I mean, most of those decks went Sanctum of the Void anyway, so it's It's more of an early game land now. Will it see play? We will have to see. I think mono corruption decks would love this kind of thing, or just two color corruption decks that are more tempo focused. But those decks don't really exist right now, especially two color decks, because monocolor was already playing this kind of thing since they only go double corruption. But something like Lightning Zombies, for instance, could not play the Old Haunted Cemetery because it was double corruption, and that deck does not go to double corruption. So I'm happy this change happened. Whether it'll see play or not depends on how much play corruption gets, and I think that's still on the low end of things. We'll have to see. Corruption's one of those colors that has never been good, and eventually it will have its day in the sun, but I don't think now is that time. Midnight Cravings, which is a change to Midnight Feast. Midnight Feast was 3 mana sorcery speed, or just normal spell, and you could put 3 +1/+1 counters onto up to 3 zombies for 3 mana, but you had to like put 3 creature cards in their graveyard back in their deck or something. It just had absurd restrictions. Now what it does, it gives 2 zombies you control +1 attack and +1 speed. I actually like this because it works well with Flesh Sculptor, and also means that Midnight Cravings double zombie going second can slaughter red decks. It also makes Insatiable Ghoul into a elf killer, so I do really like Midnight Cravings. I've tried to fit it into any zombie decks I've tried. I don't think it's quite there. Like, it's not quite what the deck wants. We'll have to see. I think maybe a 3 mana version of this to put a might counter on them instead would probably be much better. We'll have to see. It is an instant in corruption now though, which is very, very cool. But I like the design of the card. Is it powerful enough? I'm not sure. I think that, as I said, 3 mana might counter would be better than just +1 attack for 2. But maybe someone will figure out some place for this. It might just be corruption in general not being strong enough as opposed to the card itself. Splitting Headache, a nerf in corruption, weirdly enough. Just move my microphone a bit. Nerf in corruption. So Splitting Headache got changed from 2 mana to 3. The main reason for this was twofold. 1, trials, and 2, getting Splitting Headache twice on turn 5 was just miserable. Or turn 4. Yeah, turn 4. 4 mana, 2 levels was just miserable. Like, it didn't happen that often, but when it did, it was just, made you want to slit your wrists. It was horrible. So, I'm both, like, happy and sad they nerfed this. I was not a fan of playing more than 2 or 3 Splitting Headaches anyway. I've always preferred Mesmerizing Spirit as a card. But Headache, Mesmerizing Spirit you could definitely play around. Headache was just not that pleasant of an experience on either side of it. I played a lot of discard in the past, and I'm not sure about Headache. I think Headache is just straight not playable right now, but the question is, was it good for the game in the first place? What I would like to see is corruption taken in a different direction. Just trying to fix it by concept as opposed to by buffs and nerfs, because I don't really think that's possible. It's just so weak relative to everything else. So yeah, we'll have to see. But I think the Splitting Headache nerf makes sense from a design perspective, but not from a balance perspective. But when it comes down to it, corruption, as I said, is so weak compared to everything else that I think fixing them design-wise first and then buffing them up in the aspects you want to focus on is probably better than just buffing up random cards and seeing what happens, since that normally doesn't go well. So yeah, good nerf, but it is a bit of a random addition for a lot of people just looking at it from a balance perspective. Dreadknight. Now, I actually suggested changes to Dreadknight, which was changing it to whenever it enters the field and then at the beginning of every turn. So once per turn, move a creature back. What they did with Dreadknight is that they said, so when it enters the field, move 2 enemy creatures to the support line. I actually really like this change, twofold. First of all, it solves the 1 speed problem, because it basically blocks 2 creatures when you play it, which is really cool. And the other thing is that it blocks 2 creatures when you attack with it. They're not going to take a Dreadknight hit, so they're going to block it. And if they block it, and then you play another one, they're just completely screwed. The other thing it does is it lets you set up Infernal Tribute safely, where you can put 2 things back, attack with it, see if they block it, and then you can just Infernal them. Or you could just go for like an Advanced Arrows Hero Power after the Dreadknight and just lock down the board over and over and over again. Things like that. That's really cool. But as I said, I think corruption in general is too weak, but I do like the changes they're making. Dreadknight, I think, is the first 1-speed creature they've made that does not, at least first big one, that has solved the 1-speed problem.
whether it's strong enough is not to do with its ability, it's not to do with its role, but it's to do with whether or not it can see play in a metagame and whether or not its stats and cost are worth, whether or not its stats and ability are worth the cost, basically. But I do like the ability, I like the idea of putting this ability in a 1-speed creature, and I think that, as I said, they've solved the 1-speed problem for Dreadknight. Whether or not it's powerful enough to see play, time will tell. Now, a couple of the changes they actually made are just a couple tweaks to the UI. First things first, this has been changed, so if I just like bring up, I guess, Sankala, I can now minimize this by clicking this, which is amazing. It also works in game, and you get chat notifications in game, which is something that was really irritating before, and I'm glad that they fixed. It also means that the chat is more of a usable feature as opposed to just a kind of cool thing that's, you know, there. Besides that, we've got a couple bug fixes. 2 of the starter decks got updated, the Rage and Dominion ones, because they changed a lot of the stuff that was related to them. And the last thing I want to talk about with this patch, unless I've forgotten something, I don't think so. The last thing I want to talk about with this patch is actually the secondary change to Fav Charm, because I left this to the end because it's very complicated and I have to talk about this. So Fav Charm's cost got increased, but it also, if you notice, has an extra line here. This combat, it loses all powers and attacks the enemy hero available. Now this is a line that basically silences whatever you steal. Now me and Fuzz spent about 30 minutes testing what does and what doesn't get silenced by Fav Charm when you steal it. We found out that any static effects, so the stats of a card, do not change. We mean the numbers here, the speed, and also we discovered that aspects like flying, deadly, ranged, things like that, those are considered stats on the card. They are permanent and cannot be gotten rid of with Fav Charm. However, any ability that thing has, all of them below it, are completely erased. So we discovered that if you bounce a Primordial Triet, when it's been stolen, all the elves go to the graveyard, because this never happens. We also discovered that if you kill a phoenix when it's been stolen, it doesn't come back. If you steal Antriel, it keeps its own life bound, but the rest of the creatures on their side lose life bound. You can't steal Guardian of the Faithful and nullify its ability because it counts as... It triggers before the steal happens, basically. So it just wipes everything out. But besides that, pretty much everything is taken away by that. Now, there is a couple more confusing ones, like Spectral Aurite. We discovered Spectral Aurite has base stats of 3/3. But if you steal it when it has more than 3 energy, it will go back to 3 attack. But if you steal it when it has 3 energy, it will just stay as a 3/3. So we did discover that. There's a couple weird interactions with it, but the easiest way of remembering is that the stats stay identical, and any text below the stats get erased. All the text gets erased. Which also leads to some weird things with Brother in Arms. But yeah, all the text gets erased. But that's about it as far as this patch goes. As I said, long patch review, 45 minutes of patch review. This was a big patch. Now, how much impact did it have on the game? We will see. I think that I'm more veering on the low end of impact, as there was a lot of changes. But I think that in the end, the Neva decks will die off. We're going to see some Rage. Rage Rush is going to come back a bit because they got some nerfs, but the 20 life is also a buff. I think we're going to see some basic Neva decks. We may see some 2-color Neva Rush decks. I think that'd be really cool since they have a lot more 2-color, 2-mana options now in Brother Arms and Primordial Triet. Maybe that will happen. Maybe there's an Implants deck that can actually function since it has draw power, and Coronis, more importantly. So yeah, we're going to have to see how that pans out. I think there's obviously going to be a Wisdom Dominion deck, as there always is. Although Silencer got changed, so that I think it's actually worse in Control, but in Wisdom Dominion Control, but better in a lot of other decks. But it's a weird patch to evaluate. I think that in the end, we're just going to have to see a month from now and see what happens and what gets changed. Now, the last thing about this patch was the 3D battlefield.
That has been delayed slightly. It's almost finished. They're just testing it out for bugs, and that will be in the game in about 2 weeks. But anyway, thank you all for watching. If you like the content, please subscribe. If you have any feedback, want to ask me any questions, put it in the comment section below. But as now, this has been Jotto, signing off.